Hey everybody, welcome back to another Pro Tools 2 tutorial for our summer course. I wish I could keep a consistent video release schedule. It's just definitely difficult to find time, find a acoustically good time, especially I live off of a main road, so it's just always noisy. But anywho, let's hop into the lesson today. I'm going to try and keep them a little bit shorter. So today what we'll focus on, or at least in this video, we'll focus on level balancing. And level balancing is the first step of our rough mix process. The whole point of getting a rough mix is to get a really solid foundation. So that way later in the mixing process, we can really make some creative and defining mixing decisions without having to worry about problems like tone issues in individual instruments and little buzzes and noises and hums. Hopefully, in the previous stage of this processing, right, or this process, you've edited up your audio well enough that you don't have a bunch of noise. But editing is really just about cleaning, right? Getting the tracks to be clean, consistent, clear. Now we're starting to actually focus on the sonic qualities of each track, cleaning those up and making those, at least presenting them in their most ideal form. All right, so one of the first things I'm going to do in a rough mix is actually upload a reference track into my Pro Tools file. So a reference track is essentially a track that you think, right, has qualities of a mix that you find really good and pleasing. So this could be that it's very balanced, right? Maybe the mixer in this particular song treated the guitars very well. For instance, think of a John Mayer track. If I'm mixing something with guitars and has like an acoustic rock feel, I'm usually leaning toward John Mayer because I really love that sound. I love the way his guitars and his multiple layers of guitars really come out in the mix, right? So in this case, I actually picked a Marley track. It's a reggae tune, so it matches the vibe of the Run, Run, Run multi-track that you should be doing for your project this week. I'm not going to play it right now because I don't want to have to worry about copyright issues for YouTube. So I'm going to mute this right now. Oh, it's already muted. But essentially what I'm going to do, especially because I'm mixing in headphones, which is not ideal. I would normally mix on my speakers, but I don't have access to my workspace right now. But it's very important to understand how your levels relate in comparison to the levels of another track. Now, word to the wise, one thing I'll actually point out to you is that when you're reference mixing or mixing from a reference track, please make sure that you're not matching the full volume or level of that track, because this one here in particular is already mastered. If we zoom in on these waveforms, look at how big these waveforms are. We're mixing at this point, so we're not looking to get our track to the final volume, the final level it should be at. That happens in the mastering stage. This is mastered, so what I'm really listening to this for is the balancing of the different elements in the mix. How does the kick relate to the bass? How do the guitars sit in the mix relative to the vocals? That's what I'm really following after. And even some things like, how much reverb is applied to this track and in what way, right? How are things panned out? It gives me some sort of a point of reference to always bounce back to. All right, so let me zoom out a little bit. And let's hop into this rough mix. So I'll play a moment of this song, although I know you guys will have the opportunity to listen to it when you mix it yourself. So notice right away we are already clipping. If we have all the faders set to 0, which they are, everything's clipping already. So that's already a major issue in terms of mixing, because we don't want to add extra distortion into the signal just because it's clipping. All right. So this is one of the things we want to control. One way I would do this just right off the bat is I would head to our mix window. All right. I'm going to go to the bottom left corner of the screen to pull out this little track list area. And I'm going to go down to groups, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all, just highlight that. And this gives me the ability to turn all the faders down at once in the mix window. All right. Why this is helpful is because I can bring the overall mix down. And so now I can mix from a point where the tracks aren't ridiculous. I'm going to move myself for a hot minute. One word to the wise when you do this all function to move the faders, it literally moves all the faders down. So you'll want to hop back over to your master fader track and just set that back to 0 so that's nice and balanced. So I'm going to do that by hitting the Option key. I think it's Alt on PC. And if I click, there it is. Option or Alt, if you click, it resets your faders. It resets most things like knobs, faders, back to 0. All right, so just remember to do that, otherwise everything's going to be too low. So let me hit play and let's see if we're distorting or not. Right, so that's a much better level. At this mixing stage, we want to keep in mind, right, that we want to leave room for applying different effects and effect processing, and we need to leave room for the mastering stage. If your levels are all the way up to 0, there's no headroom, right? There's no room for a mastering engineer, even if it's yourself, to come in and do any type of processing to get it to a commercial level standard. All right, so generally when we're mixing, we want to try and get to around like -6 dB area, leave that much headroom for the mastering engineer. You could even leave -3, but -6 is even better, so they have more room to enhance the sound and really get it polished. All right, so these are the things to consider when you're mixing. All right, I'm going to travel. Hello. Okay, go away. So one way people mix is by starting with all the faders at a neutral level. So doing something like having all the faders, you know, down here, or starting at 0 if the mix isn't too loud. And that's fine. My preferred method of mixing is to actually start with all the faders down and then gradually add in one track at a time, usually starting with the bass and kick relationship and then moving up. All right, so I'm gonna group this again and bring everything down. Okay, and then remember this brings down the master fader, so I'll hit Option or Alt, and that should bring back the master fader here. I'm going to close this track list off. So now we can focus on the mix in particular. All right. So let's start with the bass and the kick relationship. All right. This was the focus of last week's lecture, and so now I'll cover this in the video. So what I'll do is I'm going to start with the bass, because I want to get a good low-end foundation. This is really my goal right now. All right, and I'm actually going to turn up my overall system volume just so I can hear that a little bit better and not have to boost the Pro Tools level. All right, so let's get that nice and comfy. All right, and then I'm going to add the kick, because I'm trying to get that kick, you know, bass relationship. And then I'm going to add different elements of the drum set so I can get the whole picture of the rhythm section here, right? This is going to be our foundation. And as I go along, I'll make little adjustments like turning the kick down a little bit, get the rim, and put the bass back up. I feel like that can really pop out some more. But again, I'm concerned with not clipping, so I'm always going to go back to the master fader as I'm doing this bouncing. So let me add some more here. Add overheads. All right. This hasn't come in yet, so let's pretend. And oh, there we go. That can definitely pop out a little bit more. Hello. All right. So now I have this kick and bass relationship that I like for now. I'll definitely check it on speakers as that's my preferred mixing setup, but it's fine for now. And at this point, I would also be going back and forth with the reference mix and checking with that too. All right. Next, I'm going to add in the chordal instruments. And the whole idea here with doing it with this method, starting with all the faders down, is that I'm building a foundation, right? And then, especially with the low end, and then I'm sitting the other elements on top of and in between the rest of the mix. That's how I visualize it, at least. So let's start to add in some of these electric guitars. It's fine when they come. All right. I'm just going to throw the organs in too. And what I'm just trying to do is fit all the little pieces together and make sure that I can hear everything as I'm gradually adding things in. I'm just fitting it together, the basic level, focusing on the balance and the relationship. Sometimes you want to solo, like I could barely hear the piano, so I just need to figure out what it is. Like barely is a thing. Okay. Hello. It's so small. There we go. Yeah. We'll just pretend like I know where to put that. Okay. Okay, so at this point I take a little break and I'm listening to the instrumental tracks, right? And I'm trying to understand how those fit together and how I want them to. And then I'm going to try and put the vocals on top of and within that mix too. There is a philosophy. Some people believe you should start with the vocals or the lead instrument first because theoretically whatever you start with takes up the most space in a mix. So some people like to start with the vocals or the lead instrument and build around. For me, maybe because I'm more musician than vocalist, I like to get a good rhythm foundation and low end foundation and build on top of that. Different mixing philosophies do experiment. I'll say that, experiment. So I'm gonna add these vocals on top of this mix, which I like the balance for now. And my goal right now is to just try and get them to fit. They're not going to fit perfectly. There's more work to do, but be prominent, but not stick out like a sore thumb. That's the goal.
Babylon, I go gone. Run, run, run. Babylon, I go gone. Run, 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 him run. Wicked land I go wrong. Run, 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 him run.
And you can see here that I'm clipping a little bit. And so what I would do in this case, because I actually like my balance, right? For now. I like my balance. So what I'm going to do in this situation, all right? What is this track? Oh, this is my reference. I'm going to pull the track list back out, go to groups, and again, I like the balance. It's just clipping a little bit. So I'm going to pull all these tracks down just by a little bit. Remember to take away groups. Then hit Alt, so the master fader is at 0. All right, so that's the basic technique, or at least the one I use the most, to get a good rough mix. This is setting the foundation for the rest of your mixing experience. And when you're doing a rough mix, you actually want to mix relatively fast. It's kind of mixing with your gut. Don't slave over this. Mix in phases. So this is why I structured the lecture like this, because this is how I mix. I have a pre-rough mix, then I kind of have like the meat and potato, bread and butter type mixing, the really hefty work. And then I have a sweetening section where I'm trying to add that polish. And then I'll do a final check. But all of these things, I give myself time and space. I'm not doing it all in one shot. And so that's why the rough mix, it shouldn't take that long. Try and do it with your gut. Listen, don't overanalyze, and as you do more, you'll be more instinctual with this. But just notice how how long did this even take me? Not that long. Think of the rough mix, especially level balancing, like this. All right. So I will see you next video, which will be about subtractive and additive EQing, still in this rough mixing process, all as a means of setting up a good, clean foundation for your mix. All right. See you next video.